king who listened. Long ago, in a vast and powerful kingdom, there lived a mighty king named Sumarth. He was known throughout the lands for his unmatched bravery and undefeated battles. Under his reign, the kingdom expanded, the treasury overflowed, and fear of his army spread to every border. But as the kingdom grew, so did the king's pride. He surrounded himself with advisors who only praised him, artists who sang only his victories, and nobles who feared his anger more than they respected his wisdom. Slowly, he became deaf to truth. Not because his ears stopped working, but because his ego grew louder than the voices around him. King Sumarth believed he needed no counsel. "I have built this empire with my sword and mind," he would often boast. What could these commoners possibly teach me? As the years passed, the people began to suffer. Farmers struggled under rising taxes. Soldiers were sent on endless campaigns with no rest. Merchants lost trade due to unstable borders. But no one dared to tell the king the truth. Fear silenced the kingdom more than any law. One day, a strange old traveler appeared at the palace gates. Dressed in dusty robes and holding a wooden staff, he asked to meet the king. Intrigued by his courage, the guards brought him before the throne. The court laughed as he stood in front of the golden dais, humble and quiet. But the traveler raised his head and said, "Your Majesty, I bring a gift. It is invisible to the proud but priceless to the wise." Amused, King Sumarth leaned forward. "And what is this invisible treasure?" he asked. The old man unwrapped a small object, a simple mirror, framed in plain wood. "This," he said, "is the mirror of truth. But it shows your reflection only if you listen, not with your ears, but with your heart." The king scoffed and looked into the mirror. He saw nothing but a blur. Angrily, he tossed it aside. "Your mirror is useless," he declared. The old man smiled gently and said, "Perhaps, but when your heart is ready, it will show you what your eyes cannot." With that, he bowed and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. That night, the king stared at the mirror, turning it over in his hands. Still nothing, but something had shifted inside him. The next morning, he noticed things he never had before. A guard who struggled to stand due to an injury, but said nothing. A maid whose hands trembled while pouring wine. A farmer begging at the gates, dismissed before he could speak. And suddenly, the king remembered the traveler's words, "Listen with your heart." Driven by a strange urge, the king decided to disguise himself. Wearing the clothes of a common man, he left the palace without his soldiers or fanfare. For the first time in years, he walked through the streets alone. He spoke to weavers whose songs had turned from praise to pain. He ate with a blacksmith who once crafted royal swords but now fed his children with borrowed grain. He sat by a soldier's bed who whispered, "We fight for the kingdom, but we are forgotten once the war ends." Everywhere he went, the people spoke, honestly, openly, tearfully. They thought he was just a traveler, so they shared their hearts. And King Sumarth listened, really listened, not as a ruler but as a man. He began to understand the cracks in his kingdom were not in the walls, but in the trust he had lost. After weeks, he returned to the palace. His beard had grown, his robe was dusty, but his eyes were clear. He walked into the throne room, holding the mirror of truth. The ministers stood in silence as he addressed them. "From this day forward, no decision shall be made without hearing the voice of the people. Each week, this court shall have a place for a farmer, a soldier, a merchant, and a mother, because their words matter more than gold or swords." The hall was stunned. Poets lowered their lutes. Generals bowed their heads. The king turned to the mirror once again, and this time he saw his reflection, not as a warrior, not as a ruler on a golden throne, but as a man who had learned to listen, a man who had humbled his heart. Years later, when King Sumarth passed away, the kingdom did not mourn a conqueror, they mourned a listener, a leader who found the courage not in giving orders, but in hearing truth. His legacy lived not in castles or coins, but in the trust he rebuilt. Moral: true leadership is not about being right all the time. It's about having the strength to listen, even when it's hard. A crown gives you power, but listening earns you respect. When leaders stop listening, they stop leading.